5 o'clock. All right, good evening. Welcome to tonight's Public Safety Committee meeting and Committee of the Whole. It's Monday, February 5th, 2024, and I'm calling our meeting to order. Clerk, please note the roll call. We have Councilmember Christensen in the room and Councilmember Cotton present, as well as Councilmember Ethan Benson and Councilmember Elwood, Brandon Elwood, I'll get it right, and newest council member, Susan Torgerson. So welcome all. So with that, I'm going to go through and do a couple introductions. We're expecting Councilmember Sarah Perry to join us here shortly if she has, unless she is joining us remotely. I know she's got a busy schedule today and want to make sure that she gets a chance to be introduced. First order of business is the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Are there any changes, adjustments to tonight's agenda? I will note that we will make sure that we give time to Chief Lynch following Kelly's presentation to make comments. And I'm gonna find some time here to buy as Councilmember Sarah Perry joins us in the council chambers here. Thanks to everybody who's joining us online as well. We will move on to public comments before doing the rest of our agenda. So with that in mind, the floor is now open for public comments. That due to today's agenda, we are going to limit the time to 2 minutes. We'll take comments first from those attending in person, then those online. Of course, you're always welcome to submit your comments to the city clerk to be included in the record. We encourage your input. Please understand that if the matter is new, we will not act on it here. However, we may consider to address it in our work ahead. For those wishing to make public comments, when you are recognized by the chair, please come forward to the podium. We will start with persons in the room first and then those online. We'll ask you to state your legal name and address for the record. Direct your comments to the committee as a whole and not as individuals. Please understand that we will listen intently. At the direction or the discretion of the chair, we may refer your matters to the administration or department director for further follow-up. Please keep your comments germane to public safety, health, and wellness topics. Would anybody in the council chambers like to address the committee? Seeing none. Would anybody online like to make any public comments? Please raise your hand. Right, I don't see anyone. There's no one who's called in. So if you called in, let us know. You want to press *9 to raise your hand to speak. Okay, hearing none. We will close this portion of the public comments. All right. Welcome to Councilmember Sarah Perry. Thank you so much for being here. Let me give you a little bit of background. Today's topic comes from the Regional Law, Safety, and Justice Committee. And normally I just kind of report out what I've heard and share with you. But tonight's topic is so important that I've asked Kelly Mangia Aracena to join us tonight, and I probably have now just butchered her name, but She is going to be sharing with us the work that she's been doing over the last 10 years at King County. I think it's important as elected leaders, local leaders, where we have a chance to influence policy, that we understand really what's happening through the juvenile court system and the things that we can do to help make it better for both the kids that are going through the process to get them the help that they need, as well as keeping our communities safe, which is another concern for all of us. So I want to call on Councilmember Perry, because we had this conversation a couple months ago about the need to work together to find solutions. And like all of us that are involved in this, we just don't have a firm understanding of the challenges out there. And Kelly's presentation really brought those to light. So with that, I'd like Councilmember Perry to step up to the podium and add her remarks, and then do the honors of introducing Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I sure appreciate being here today and being invited, and the opportunity to engage together with the Snoqualmie City Council and these important issues. As you know, this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and to make sure that we are paying attention to our youth, behavioral health, and the intricacies of the systems and how they work together and how they don't. And we've had a firsthand front seat view of that with some of the things that have happened here, but there are also many different ways that we can pay attention to what's happening with our youth, so that there's a positive outcome where possible, that we are educated, that we are paying attention to what we have in front of us. So even though Washington, and I'm reading for the audience, I'm reading my phone because I forgot my paper notes. So even though Washington State has been a leader and really at the forefront of anti-trafficking legislation, it's still incredibly important that we work together in a coalition of governments and community service providers to prevent further exploitation. Today, I get to introduce Kelly Mandrasina, who is the Commercially Sexually Exploited Children Policy and Program Manager for King County Superior Court. Last summer, Kelly, alongside Day Shogren, King County Council's Equity and Social Justice Director, briefed Council on Commercially Sexually Exploited Children Task Force and labor exploited children as well. I also had the opportunity to meet one-on-one with Kelly and further discuss the critical work her team is doing to raising awareness and providing resources for community members. Kelly is a wealth of knowledge and works with our CSEC task force. I know she's here today to share important information on their work and tools like the commercial sexual exploitation identification tool. I encourage you all to listen, to ask questions, to lean into the information. And the information she'll share today will be foundational as we all continue to work together to support our young people and prevent exploitation. And many of us know from our data and the census tract that this district has is the single highest percentage of children ages 17 and under in all of King County. Snoqualmie, so that's 26% of our population. Snoqualmie is at 31%, which is 1/3 of the population is ages 17 and under. And so we have an opportunity to really pay attention to our youth across the district and to do that together. So I'm very excited that we are paying attention to this and leaning in. So please join me in welcoming Kelly for her presentation.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, Councilmember Perry. And I'd like to say, of the current sitting council members, you're the first one who outreached me. I didn't have to outreach you, and it's just wonderful to have that relationship. And thank you to the City Council for inviting me to come here and share about the work that we do. Please ask questions. This can be very data heavy, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page and we're understanding what's going on. So I work for Superior Court, specifically juvenile court, and I was hired in July of 2013. And my job is multifaceted and there are many aspects of it. I coordinate the King County CSEC, or Commercially Sexually Exploited Children's Task Force, under the leadership of a sitting Superior Court judge, Judge Ballinger, and a retired Superior Court judge, Judge Cahan. As you know, oftentimes people show up if a judge invites people to the room. And so Judge Ballinger and Judge Cahan invite us and convene us, and then I am the background doing the worker bee, getting things done behind the scenes. And what I'd like to talk about specifically today is the screening we're doing for commercial sexual exploitation in juvenile court, why we're doing it, what we found, and how it's relative to all juvenile justice, law enforcement, and everything, depending upon what happens in the Senate right now in Washington State. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So what is commercial sexual exploitation? It is helpful if we all have the same understanding of what we're talking about. Commercial sexual exploitation of children, CSEC, is also called sex trafficking. The definition is incredibly simple. We need to have a minor, a commercial sex act, we have trafficking. A minor, we're all on the same page with that, is anyone who has not yet reached the age of 18. A child, somebody 17 and younger, they're a minor. A commercial sex act is any sexual act, any sexual encounter in exchange for something of value. It does not have to just be money. It could be drugs. It could be a sandwich. It could be a place to stay for the weekend. If you have a 16-year-old and an adult says to them, you can come stay at my house and not be homeless, but you're going to have sex with me, that is by federal definition trafficking. Anytime we have somebody under the age of 18 engaging in a commercial sex act, they are a victim of trafficking, full stop. The second that 17-year-old becomes 18 and is an adult, it's much more complicated. We have to prove that the adult engaged in the commercial sex act because of force, fraud, or coercion. We do not need to prove force, fraud, or coercion for our kids. Therefore, it's significantly easier for our law enforcement and our prosecutors to prove trafficking with our children than it is to prove trafficking with our adults. With our kids, commercial sex act, trafficking. With our adults, we have to prove the why and the commercial sex act. So I work in juvenile court and kids are my focus, and they're actually the easier one to focus on from a legal perspective. Any questions on that? All right, let's continue on. So universal screening. The first thing that I want to say is currently in Washington State at this moment in time, there is no legal requirement for child welfare, juvenile justice, or law enforcement to use a validated tool. At this moment, there is no legal requirement that we do so. However, Senate Bill 6006 requires universal validated screening at child welfare, DCYF, and juvenile justice. There's an original bill and a substitute bill. The substitute bill changes a little bit about the requirements at child welfare. It does not change anything for juvenile justice. And it requires a juvenile justice agency to screen for commercial sexual abuse using a validated screening tool. And a juvenile justice agency includes the following: law enforcement, diversion units, juvenile courts, and detention centers. There was an executive hearing on this bill this morning, and I listened to it. And then they went into caucus, and I don't know what happened after that, but it sounds like this bill is going to continue progressing through the system, which means it's highly likely that they said it would be July 1st, 2025, screening would become required across Washington State if this bill passes. We can continue on. Oh, please, go ahead. Who's the sponsor? Senator Dingra is the sponsor. Yes. Great question. I'm going to grab. There was a previous bill that passed in 2020, and it was House Bill 1775 with Representative Orwell in the House and Senator Dingra in the Senate. And that was what we call safe harbor. And safe harbor is a term that encompasses all of sex trafficking of children legislation. And safe harbor did a lot of things, but what it did most importantly is as of January 1st of this year, prostitution is no longer a crime for juveniles. Historically speaking, we charged children with the crime of prostitution, even though they were by federal definition victims of trafficking. As of this year, that's no longer possible. So we had, in passing Safe Harbor, which is a wonderful thing, let's treat children like victims instead of criminals, full on board with that. We did make it more difficult for law enforcement to engage with the young people because historically they could have stopped them, potentially arrested them. Now, Safe Harbor is a good thing. We no longer charge children with the crime of prostitution. However, House Bill 1775 included 2 receiving centers, one in Eastern Washington, one in Western Washington, where law enforcement could take a young person who they suspected of being trafficked. These would be therapeutic residential programs, inpatient, that a young person could stay for multiple days or weeks, depending upon their needs. Therapeutic placements. One in Eastern Washington, one in Western Washington. They don't exist. For a couple of reasons, licensing requirements, and candidly, a laughable amount of money to make the program run. And so they're not, law enforcement now, if they come across a young person who is likely being trafficked, they cannot take them to detention, which is a good thing. They cannot take them to a receiving center because we don't have them, and that's a bad thing. And the amount of community-based services we have, we are resource rich in King County compared to the rest of the state. We also have such a high population that even the resources we have are stretched incredibly thin. And these young people are some of the most vulnerable young people, and we don't have enough services and places for them to take them. So why do we screen? Starting in April 2014 up to March 2018, juvenile court referred 159 young people to community-based services before we were doing universal screening. But we identified those young people and we referred them to appropriate services. We knew we were under-referring boys. The data shows that boys are absolutely trafficked as well, but when we, the adults in the room, make assumptions, we over-identify girls and we don't identify our boys. There's a lot of implicit bias that we have as adults. So additionally, Dr. Deborah Boyer, who's an anthropologist at the University of Washington and a former executive director of the Organization for Prostitution Survivors, did a report in 2019. And in that report, talking to service providers in King County, they identified probably between 500 to 700 young people between the ages of 12 and 24 who were being exploited in our area. And they asked the service providers data about the people they were providing services to. And the sad reality is the average age of first exploitation was about 14. The average age of first connection to services was about 16. Young people were waiting 2 years from being harmed to getting connected to services. And so sitting in juvenile court, and I think everyone in this room would say, that's not acceptable. We need to identify people sooner, get them connected to services sooner. 2 years is abysmal. We must do better. So we're going to screen for this. We also wanted to honor Rebecca Hedman, Becca of the Becca Bill. And that's why we included juvenile court and the Becca programs in our universal screening. For those of you who don't know, Becca Hedman, she was a commercially sexually exploited child. She was murdered by a buyer 30 plus years ago. And we've known since then that there is a nexus between the at-risk youth programs, the child in need of services, the truancy programs, and CSEC. We've known there was a nexus, and we really wanted to bring family court and juvenile court programs together. Next slide, please. So how do we do it? I wrote for, and received a federal grant. It was perfectly called Enhancing Juvenile and Family Courts Response to Human Trafficking. Could not have asked for a better grant to apply for this. With that funds, we hired a CSEC coordinator and screener. We've also providing additional training content. Myself and the coordinator received training on using the SEEIT. The SEEIT is a validated screening tool used or developed by the West Coast Children's Clinic out of California. It was developed in partnership with survivors. The tool that we use is a file review tool. We are not asking additional questions of a young person. We are not causing any additional trauma. We as the court have access to a significant amount of personal information about people. We know all of the things the questionnaire asks, looking at court records, looking at police records, looking at all of the information we have access to. So we're not asking the young person any direct questions. We're looking at all of the reports that exist that are already asking those questions, reading the reports, doing the screening tool. Prior to using the SEIT, approximately 3% of the young people in our system were referred to services. Since implementing it, approximately 10% of our young people are being referred to services. We've increased our referrals. Next slide, please. So selecting this tool, we picked the West Coast Children's Clinic SEIT because it was a validated tool specifically designed for child welfare workers, probation officers. I'm juvenile court. We've got probation officers. It was a very good fit. Additionally, it was developed in partnership with survivors, which is so important to the work that we do. We want everything to be survivor-centered. Additionally, it is not an assessment. It is not a questionnaire in which we're asking young people questions. We're looking at information that's already available. We do not want to re-traumatize a young person in any way, shape, or form. So picking this tool was very important to me. Next slide, please. So it looks at 8 different domains: housing and caregiving, prior abuse and trauma, physical health and appearance, environment and exposure, relationship and personal belongings, signs of current trauma, coercion, and exploitation. Those are the different domains. And a young person will receive a score of 0 to 3, where there's no concern, or we don't have enough information. And one of the reasons why I like this tool is it allows you to select, I don't know. So you're not making assumptions, which I think is so important. Possible concern is 4 to 8, and then clear concern is 9 to 23. The most questions are looking at current status, what's going on in the youth's life currently, right? Are they using substances right now? Most are current. Do they have a place to stay, or are they homeless right now? The following 5 questions look at the lifetime. Has youth been involved in child welfare? That's lifetime. Has youth been sexually abused, physically abused, or emotionally abused? Lifetime. Has youth witnessed domestic violence? Lifetime. Youth has current or past involvement with law enforcement or juvenile justice. Youth has a history of sexual exploitation. Well, we are a juvenile justice court doing the screening. Every young person is going to have current or past involvement with juvenile justice. So the moment a young person walks through our door, they're sitting at a score of 2 minimum, right? So it's very rare for a young person to have no concern once they're coming to us. Next slide, please. So I pulled the data about 2 weeks ago. And this is our data after 21 months of screening. Chris Bennett, our screener and coordinator, has screened 1,090 youth. Only 63 youth, or 6%, showed no concern. 773 youth, or 71%, were possible concern. 254, or 23%, were clear concern. And I broke it down for male and female youth as well, with 12% of our boys showing clear concern and 45% of our girls showing clear concern. I did not break out our trans and gender variant youth because there are so few of them. I don't want to identify anyone. I will say no young person who identifies outside the gender binary was no concern. If somebody identified beyond that, they were either at possible or clear concern. Nationally, only about 11% of people who are screened identify as clear concern. So why in King County do we have 23% if nationally everyone's only getting 11%? My guess is that King County has done a lot of really innovative things in our juvenile justice system, particularly with a lot of cases being referred out into the community. We have programs like RCP, Restorative Community Programs, where the prosecutors refer cases to the community, which means the cases that actually come into juvenile court are either much more serious felonies or the young people have significant histories, significant trauma. Basically, because of the work we've done in King County, what is happening is we are consolidating children with a lot of trauma in our juvenile justice system, which is why we're seeing twice as high here in King County than in other juvenile justice areas throughout the country, because the kids entering juvenile court have a lot of trauma in their backgrounds. Next slide, please. So numbers, it doesn't matter your ethnicity. We're showing clear concern across the board for different ethnicities. This can happen to kids of all genders and all ethnicities. We do see disproportionately high numbers of young people who are kids of color and LGBTQ kids being exploited. What we see is the more marginalized somebody is in our community, the more likely they are to be represented in the victim population. For instance, this data is not here, but it's on the King County CSEC website. In King County, in charged cases where the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office is charging commercial sexual abuse of a minor, which is what an adult is charged with when they are trying to buy sex from a child, we don't always have a real child victim, right? Sometimes it's Detective Washington on the other end of the computer screen and no real child is being harmed. When we have real child victims in King County in charged cases, the majority of the time they are a youth of color. The majority of youth in King County are not youth of color. We have vastly overrepresented youth of color in our victim population in real charged cases, particularly Black girls. They make up about 42% of the victims in our charged cases. So I'm going to say that again, about 42%. The Black population of King County, not even close to that. These are Black girls who are being vastly disproportionately harmed, right? And we see a significantly high level of clear concern and possible concern in our African American Black youth that we are identifying. Next slide, please. All age groups, across the board, all age groups. When we do get 11, 12, 13-year-olds at juvenile court, they have a lot of trauma. We had an 11-year-old present to us because there were additional crimes, but when she presented to us, she had walked herself out to Aurora to meet a pimp because that was a better option in her life, in her head. It was not actually a better option, but that's what she was thinking at that point in time. And she's 11. Service providers don't start providing services till young people are 12. So then we have to do the mad scramble of who can provide services to this young person. Wait, when is this young person's birthday? When do they turn 12? The number of 12-year-olds we are serving right now, it's terribly sad. Such young kids with such significant trauma histories, and trying to get them connected to services and get them treatment, it's a real struggle. Next slide, please. So what happens if a young person comes in and they're screened? If they're screened as clear concern, our program coordinator immediately contacts their probation counselor or the at-risk youth program manager and says, this is the score. Do you think the young person would benefit from making an advocate referral? Sometimes the young person's already connected and we don't want too many cooks in this kitchen situation. They're connected, that's good, we want to support them. Sometimes they don't have any support and we want to make that appropriate referral. So we always ask the probation counselor or the at-risk youth case manager who knows the young person best, what's the right thing here? And one of the things we found that's been really helpful is the probation counselor can say, young person, at your next meeting with me, when you're here at the court, I'm going to introduce you to this advocate who's going to work with you outside of the system and they can be there for you. And it's been very helpful to have the probation counselors make that connection. So next slide, please. So what have we learned in doing this for the last 21 months? And assuming this bill passes, everyone's going to have to start doing this, right? Boys are screening as clear concern and they are needing connection to services. Boys are trafficked. We have no boy-specific services in our area. We do have girl-specific services, nothing specific for boys. Gender variant youth screen as clear concern in need of connection to services. Absolutely. Youth who are very young, 11, 12, and 13, who are referred to juvenile court and the family court backup programs have very high levels of past trauma. Again, we're the court. We have access to all this information. We have access to dependency files. We have access to the DV cases from parents, and we know when young people were witnessing all this violence. Having good communication between the court and community providers is key. We have the young people, we have information. When we can speak with community providers and work as a team, that's ideal. When we can work together. There's not enough specialized services. We're in I'm going to call it a world of hurt right now. We have young people in need of connection, in need of support, and in need of help, and we have wait lists. And it's incredibly demoralizing when you have a young person that would you like help? Oh, just kidding. We actually don't have help. Here's your wait list you're going to sit on until somebody's available, which is incredibly sad. And we, again, are resource rich in King County compared to the rest of the state. And so we're hurting for services. The state is hurting for services. And these young people have always existed. They've always been part of our populations. They've always been part of our communities. We're just now identifying them, having the data, and realizing we need to be doing more. Next slide, please. So get involved, partner, join us on this issue. Visit kingcountycsec.org. It is a website for our King County CSEC task force. We have our events calendar on there. We have our free trainings on there. And trainings are provided free and open to the community, either as a one-off for the community or agency specific. I did a training last week, open to the community, a full day training where we met in person. And then I did a follow-up the next day with Fostering Solutions out of Yakima via Zoom. So trainings are available. I get to do trainings about every 4 to 6 months with Sound Transit. When they hire new fare ambassadors, I sit down with Sound Transit and we talk about things they can look out for on Metro and on the Link Light Rail. And I want to give credit to the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office because they gave me real cases of people being trafficked on public transportation in our area. And I get to share that with them and say, let's break this down. What do we see? How would we intervene in the future so this doesn't happen? So we have training options that are available, all free. We invite people to come to the table to be part of the conversation so that we can work together. As Councilmember Perry was saying, we have to work across systems. We have to work from our city to our county to our state. And there's a bill pending right now, House Bill 2076, which would reconvene the statewide coordinating committee under the Attorney General's office, which allows the county level task forces to report to the state and the state reports to the legislature. So having all of these ways to communicate is so important. But how can I help you specifically? It is literally my job to talk about this issue all of the time. And if Senate Bill 6006 passes and law enforcement suddenly has to start screening, I'm here to be a resource to help. Can we sign MOUs? Can we do partnerships? If juvenile detention needs to screen all the young people, well, we in juvenile court actually screen all the young people in juvenile detention. Can we work together? Can we partner so that we can share information? There's so many questions that we can have depending upon what happens with the bill, but we want to work collaboratively so that our young people get access to the best services available. And then I think I'm going to stop talking for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Kelly Mangracina.
So we say Mandracina, but if we were correct, as my great grandfather, it's Mandracina, but we don't say it that way.
Thank you, Kelly. Well,
Yeah.
so here's how I'm going to do this, if I may, just so that we're expedient with time. I'm going to first defer to Councilmember Christensen and Councilmember Cotton after that, and then the Police Chief Brian Lynch. So again, I think this is so important. You know, it's so easy for us to say, wait, our jails are full, and let's start releasing people. It's our one opportunity to make things better rather and fix things. And we have this tendency to skip over it. It's easy to gloss over the underlying issues. And this is our opportunity to fix it so that we stop the recidivism, we stop the things that are happening and not making people whole.
Yeah.
And I think that this is so critical. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for the work that you're doing. We just need to help support so that, you know, the resources are there.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I'm going to defer to Councilmember Christensen first for questions, and please go forward.
Thank you for being here. This
Yeah.
topic is obviously incredibly important and vastly under for us. My question relates to how, as we go forward, assuming this passes, our police department would be able to speak to the youth directly if they have not received authorization from the guardian or without their lawyer present, how they could be able to go forward and do that screening while being protected and complying with law.
Yeah, it's highly likely they couldn't, right? They'll just, if they're not allowed to talk to young people, if the young person has not committed any crime, one of the things that we advise is always just asking, are you okay? Just starting with a simple, are you okay? And if somebody says they're not, that is an opportunity to engage, saying like, is there anything I can do to help? Would you like to talk to me? Like, I'm not arresting you. I'm here to protect and serve. If you're not okay, we can get you connected to services. And so one of the things we found from research and from talking to survivors is the question, are you okay? And seeing somebody as a human, a person worthy of being supported is one of the best things we can do to start a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess then that as the police are coming into contact with younger folks, you're looking specifically at the folks who are not being considered someone who's committed a crime. Would they then just kind of still have their hands tied if they're coming into contact with youth who could potentially have committed a crime? And then would they have to wait until that got referred forward to the court in order to be able to speak to young people and do that assessment?
If a young person has committed a crime and you are investigating a crime and you're going to potentially arrest a young person, you do your job as you do so. And then this is sort of tangential to that. In the arrest, as you ask questions, we might find out about them being trafficked, because you're not arresting the young person for prostitution. Let's say you're arresting the young person for, okay, we've had a lot of arson lately. So let's say you're arresting a young person on the crime of arson and you're investigating that. And in the investigation, it comes out that there might be some trafficking going on. The arson is what brought the young person to the attention. Most of the time, it's very rare for law enforcement outside of, say, Aurora Avenue North, Pack Highway South, or doing intentional stings online to come across a young person in this capacity without additional criminal activity happening.
Any other questions?
That's-
All right, thank you. Councilmember Cotton, do you have some questions for Kelly?
Well, Kelly, I just want to say thank you so much for recognizing these issues coming through your court and taking some action on this, and for everything that you're doing and getting the information out there. That's really great. So I did have questions regarding so it sounds like this bill wouldn't take effect till 2025 is what I was gleaning from your information. But and that, so it's kind of a two-pronged issue. So for those under 17 but over 12, we do have resources that they can get into the system or not?
We do have some community-based resources. The law says we're required to have standalone facilities to provide those services. We don't have those standalone CSEC receiving centers. We do have community-based services. For instance, in the King County area, Youth Care provides services, Friends of Youth provides services, Y Social Impact Center provides services, REST Ops. There's quite a few organizations that provide services to young people, but we don't have inpatient or residential programming for this population.
Okay, and is that something that is on the horizon to provide that and maybe a time frame for those types of things?
Well, we were required to have it as of January 1st, 2021 for state law, and we still don't. It's twofold. The licensure requires an inpatient behavioral health center to run the programming, and one in Eastern Washington and one in Western Washington. Eastern Washington had a receiving center for a moment, and it was at Daybreak in Spokane. And when the Department of Health pulled Daybreak's license, the CSEC receiving center went away. And to be explicitly clear, there was never any indication of anything improper ever happening in the CSEC receiving center. It was simply tied to the licensure. And when the licensure got pulled, the center shut down. In Western Washington, the program has been RFP'd twice and a whopping 0 people or organizations have applied for it because they're offering $500,000 a year to run a 6 to 8 bed facility full-time in Western Washington, and that money is simply not sufficient. So even if somebody met the licensing requirement, there's not enough funds for them to do it. So legally, we are required to have one in Western Washington, and we don't.
And then lastly, what will be, or what is ultimately the goal then for the kids under 12? Will there be would the plan be someday with funding and an agency to set up a standalone or inpatient facility, the same as for the older kids?
Right now, what we're doing is we're referring to REST, Real Escape for the Sex Trade, and OPS, Organization for Prostitution Survivors, because they receive a lot of private donations that allow them to have flexible funding. And particularly Chelsea Olson at OPS is a phenomenal individual and advocate, and she works very well with the 11-year-olds. The difficulty with having such young kids is you don't want an 11-year-old in programming with a 16-year-old or 17-year-old. They're at radically different ages in life, radically different experiences, and we don't want our 16 and 17-year-old teaching our 11 and 12-year-old what's going on. So we absolutely need more services for the younger ones. We also need more services for the older ones. And while I would be ecstatic to have the standalone CSEC receiving centers, and I will speak till I'm blue in the face about our need for them, we also just need more community service advocates so that when an 11-year-old pops up, we can refer them to an advocate. A 10-year-old, we can refer them to an advocate, and we can get them connected. Because in Washington State, 12-year-olds, it's easier to go to inpatient treatment than 13-year-olds because of our age of consent for medical treatment. So getting our 12-year-olds to go to treatment is actually significantly easier than getting our 13 and 14-year-olds to go to treatment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cotton. Kelly, would you mind sharing the podium with Police Chief Brian Lynch? We have one mic, and plus you get on camera this way too.
I have to have my camera time. Yeah, thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it. My question was, until this bill goes into effect, this law goes into effect, are there things that we can do? Because if you're only seeing case reports from the police when someone is charged with a crime, there are a multitude of other reports that we write that never reach you. Is there a way of getting those to you if we have a concern?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we've done that has been a game changer is we started partnering with the Child Advocacy Center, the Children's Justice Center of King County, the CJCKC. And child advocacy centers throughout the United States bring together multidisciplinary professions to address child abuse and neglect. And when a young person experiences child sexual abuse, it's referred to the Child Advocacy Center. The prosecutor talks to the law enforcement, talks to Harborview Assault and Trauma Center, talks to Seattle Children's Hospital, and it's a coordinated response. We had the light bulb moment of the commercial sexual abuse of children is child abuse. Let's respond to it in the same way. There are forensic interviewers there, all of that. You are more than welcome as law enforcement to talk to the Child Advocacy Center, because we have advocates, we have medical providers, we have trained forensic interviewers who can all provide help and support for a young person and if you don't want to charge them with that. One of the ways we see law enforcement coming across young people a lot is they are the victims in charged cases. You're arresting the adults who are doing harm to them, and now you have a young person that you want to get connected to services. Yeah.
Is this thing working? Okay. I wanted to bridge the gap on the information on whether we can talk to juveniles.
Mm.
RCW does not allow for law enforcement to question a juvenile under any circumstances if they are the suspect of a crime that you're investigating. But I see that there's times when, like, there's runaways. Runaway is not a crime.
No.
We can
not at
talk
all.
to them when we recover them.
Mhm.
If they want to tell us their story, I can see where those times where there is no crime, but we're
Mhm.
getting information that's one that would need to go to the Child Advocacy
Yeah.
Center. And you know, I'm hoping that someday we get a little bit more leeway. If we're arresting someone, it's up to the attorney
Yeah.
whether we're allowed to question them or not. So I could see where if an officer got information that this person was being victimized,
Mhm.
does it really matter what the crime was?
Yeah.
Does it outweigh? You know, it would be my view is that we would need to run towards helping instead of incarcerating.
Absolutely. And one of the things I found is that the public defenders in particular in King County, they're very savvy about understanding if this is happening to one of their clients. And we've had cases where a young person was in detention for criminal activity that they had done. They were also absolutely a victim of a trafficking case. And law enforcement wanted to speak to the young person. And because of relationship building and really promising, young people have been given passes to go to the FBI office, do a forensic interview, and then go back to juvenile detention. And I know of one particular trafficker, because of all of the information that kid provided in the forensic interview that the defense attorney allowed because of that trust, the trafficker went away for prison for years for drugs and gun charges. They didn't even have to do the trafficking charges, and the young person never even had to testify. And it was because law enforcement and the defense counsel had built that relationship and they trusted, we're not going to ask about the theft. We're not going to ask about the drug use. We want to know about the assault. We want to know about this when you were hurt. Yeah. So it's time consuming and it takes a while, but building quality relationships. And if I can be helpful in any way, I'd love to be so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chief. Good. I'm going to allow Councilmember Perry and the opportunity to step up as well. And yeah, please. Yeah. For the purposes of the camera, so everybody can see. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for having this amazing person here, and thank you for coming. So I had a question about, we're doing these centers for
Yeah.
behavioral health.
Yes.
And the Daybreak was just a complete tragedy when
Yes.
right? And so I know that State Rep Orwell is really working on this. There's a Federal Way Center that is gorgeous, that's not being used. It has now, do these folks have to have involuntary? They have to be an involuntary?
It's unclear. So the bill said it would be a secure center. But in Washington State, as we know, you can't do secure detention outside of a criminal facility or an involuntary treatment hold. The way Daybreak did it was a 12-second delay on the door. So you go to leave and it won't let you leave for 12 seconds. So it's secure, but you could still leave.
Somebody can hit
You
that.
can, yeah,
Okay, and so that Federal Way facility might be
secure.
secure because they have an involuntary treatment
Mhm.
space, and they could do that if it didn't work for them to be one of our behavioral health centers, because those are not
Exactly.
secure.
And that would be a phenomenal place to have. I think we would all be very happy if something was in Federal Way.
Yeah.
And one of the stipulations of House Bill 1775 is the facility already has to exist. We
Oh.
can't use the money to build the facility.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
And then may I ask another question?
Please.
So I'm I'm interested in all of King County, but
Yes.
I'm very interested in our district. And so I know that our district has the least amount of crime of all, it's both violent and property crime of all of King County. We know that.
Well done.
Yes, we know
Well
that.
done.
We know that. What we also know is that we are the third fastest growing
Yeah.
crime base. So even though we are the lowest, we're growing.
Yeah.
And so do you have any way to discern or to share the data with us about the folks that are in this situation? How many? I know it's going to be fairly low, but how many are from our district?
I don't know that answer off
Can
the
we
top of
find
it.
out? maybe?
We might be able to
Okay.
find out. I will look into that for you and see what I can find out.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious because I know that poverty access adds to this. And
Absolutely.
even though we have the lowest poverty, we still have 13,000 people
Yeah.
living in 15,000 or less.
Mhm.
And I know Federal Way has like, that district, Piedmont-Ricard's district has like 28,000
Mhm.
people making 15,000 or less,
Yeah,
right? So
That's not just.
it would be helpful to understand that. And then finally, I wonder if there's any way that we can, when we're charging perpetrators,
Mhm.
if we can make a direct line, sort of the restitution, a direct line between what they're paying and the support services, the victim advocate support services.
I'm going to make you really happy right now. In the CSAM law, the commercial sexual abuse of a minor, there's mandatory fines and fees that cannot be waived. They can be reduced, but they cannot be waived by our judges. That fines and fees, 50% of them are to go to services in the area of where the person was arrested. 48% is to go to the law enforcement jurisdiction that did their arrest. 2% is to go to administrative fines and fees. Nobody knows where that money is or where it's gone to or what's happening with it. House Bill 2076 right now, Tina Orwell is sponsoring it, would include an audit
Oh, great.
to say, where's the money? What's happening? Where's it going? The city of Kent used $20,000 to hire or to supplement a victim advocate's position who worked at Kent Youth and Family Services, and she was embedded with the Kent Police Department. And those funds went directly for that, exactly as it
That
was.
is awesome.
So yes, we have to implement the law as written.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Cal.
Councilmember Perry. Kelly, I want to thank you for bringing this great topic, difficult to talk about here before us today. With those that are interested in continuing the conversation with Kelly, if you be available, could they go to the upper conference room? Is anybody using the conference room?
It's something.
Okay, that's an option. So I know we have council members from North Bend that may have an interest in specifically asking you additional questions. We weren't able to have the opportunity tonight. And with that, we are down to the end of our 50 minutes of our committee meeting. Any follow-up? First of all, this video is being recorded, so it will be on our YouTube channel for any of the providers that are out there that were not able to join us tonight. Please share this with them. Kelly's contact information is there if you want to follow up with her. Of course, reach out to Councilmember Perry's office. It's something that hopefully we can continue this discussion in other ways to be an informed community. And I appreciate your time. If there's nothing further to come before us, I will call us adjourned. Any objection from Councilmember Christensen or Cotton? Hearing none. Thank you so much for being here this evening.